The end of a god does not begin with death. It begins with distance. Osiris was not dethroned by sword or storm. He was unseated by separation. He grew respected, beloved, idealized, and in becoming ideal, he became distant. Gods do not die because they are weak. They die because they grow untouchable. Osiris ruled not with violence but with harmony. He brought crops, order, ritual, song. The people flourished, but they did not understand. Because when balance feels natural, its cost becomes invisible. And in the shadow of Osiris, another grew, not in opposition, but in absence. Set the force of intensity, desert storm, interruption. He was not evil, he was necessary, but necessity without boundary becomes ambition. Set saw Osiris not as a brother, but as a stillness, a silence, an unreachable ideal, and silence to the chaotic is suffocating. So he moved, not suddenly, but with ritual, because even betrayal in Egypt followed pattern. The murder of Osiris was not a crime of impulse, it was an act of alignment reversed. Set did not break the law. He inverted it. He turned ceremony into weapon. He used precision to unmake permanence. And in doing so, he revealed the flaw in divine order, that what is most perfect is also most fragile. Osiris did not scream. He did not resist, because the gods do not fight as mortals, they embody. So when his body was broken, he became brokenness itself, scattered across Egypt not as a body, but as memory, and memory without form becomes myth. This was not just death. This was the first dismembering, not of body but of certainty. The people felt it. Crops withered, rivers receded, dreams turned to warnings, because balance once undone echoes. Osiris was no longer a name. He was a pattern broken, shattered across the land. He was river silt without course, grain without harvest, song without voice. His death was not disappearance. It was dispersion. Set did not simply remove Osiris. He unmade him piece by piece, gesture by gesture, limb by limb, each fragment cast into a different place, not hidden, but dislocated. Because dislocation was the true weapon. In Egypt, wholeness was life. Separation was worse than death. To lose the body was to lose reunion. To lose reunion was to lose the soul. This was the true violence, not the cut, but the consequence. The people mourned not with tears, but with silence. A silence heavier than grief. A silence that held confusion, not terror, but disorientation. The Nile no longer pulsed with rhythm. The wind lost its measure. The stars seemed louder, but less meaningful. Set did not rule by law, he ruled by interruption. He was not chaos, he was distortion. He used form to break formation. Temples remained, but rituals stumbled. Priests spoke, but their words drifted, because the axis had broken, and they could not find the center. This was not just the death of a god. It was the scattering of meaning. And across this disarray, only one force stirred. Not vengeance, not rebellion, but restoration. A woman, a sister, a queen. Isis did not scream. She remembered. She did not burn. She searched. Her power was not fury. It was memory. Because when the world forgets, one must remember so deeply that memory becomes resurrection. She walked alone through silence, through broken temples, through scorched fields, not looking for vengeance, but for the body. Because to restore order, the body must be whole, not for sentiment, not for comfort, but for law. Wholeness was not emotion in Egypt. It was structure. Without structure, rituals fail. Without ritual, time unravels. Isis knew this. She did not rush. She traced the steps of separation. Each fragment of Osiris, each sacred bone was hidden in plain sight, in reeds, in mountains, in riverbeds, not buried by Set, but scattered, so no one could reassemble them, so memory would never become body again. But Isis was not just a wife. She was will. She was continuity. With every piece she found, she chanted not spells but reordering. Because magic in Egypt was not illusion, it was alignment. To speak was to structure. To name was to call into place. So she named each part, each location, each silence, and Egypt began to stir. Crops swayed again, dreams calmed, temples breathed, because memory, when made sacred, restores. But the body was not yet whole, and time was running thin. The world watched as a queen walked through absence and turned it into possibility. But she was not alone. Another watched, another listened, another waited, not Set, not Horus, but the space in between, the place where death prepares for return. Osiris was no longer flesh. He was breath without lungs, pulse without blood. He was presence without shape, because death in Egypt was not exile, it was transition. But transitions require gates, require voices, require remembering. The body had been scattered, but the name remained intact. And names in Egypt were more powerful than wounds. Isis held the name. She carried it not as a sound, but as architecture. She assembled the fragments, each one an axis, each one a doorway, not to resurrection, but to recognition. Because to live again, one must be known again. This is why Isis breathed into him not air, but orientation. She sang the name. She placed each syllable with the bones, because speech was more than voice. It was restoration of design. The breath she gave was not mortal, it was structural. She did not revive a man. She re-established a god. Osiris opened eyes not as ruler but as order remembered. He did not return to reign. He returned to testify that what is broken can be reassembled, that what is scattered can be made sacred, but not in the world above, not anymore, because Osiris had changed. He was no longer of the sun. He belonged now to depth, to judgment, to stillness. He became the breath within the tomb, the voice inside silence, the structure beneath endings. The Egyptians did not fear death, because Osiris was there, not punishing, not welcoming, balancing. He did not forget. He did not forgive. He remembered, so others could be measured, so the scale could have meaning, so the end could be fair, because endings require witnesses, and Osiris was eternal memory. The throne stood untouched. Its gold faded not from use but from waiting, because in Egypt a throne was not a seat, it was a structure. It held more than a ruler, it held alignment, and now it held absence. Osiris was not there. Set had not claimed it. Egypt sat between them, not in war but in imbalance. A throne without a king is more than an empty place. It is a question left unanswered. A cycle interrupted. The people continued. They planted, they harvested, they prayed, but the land felt thin as if breath was held too, long as if sound could not settle. Because rule was not presence, it was resonance. The pharaoh was more than man. He was bridge between law and earth, between heaven and grain. And the bridge was broken. Set ruled in name, but not in spirit. He wore the crown, but it did not fit, because power without harmony does not echo. It shouts and fades. Temples cracked, not from force but from dissonance. The gods turned away, not in anger but in silence. Egypt did not collapse. It waited for balance to find a new shape, because law, when broken, does not vanish. It adapts, and from that adaptation a seed stirred. Isis was not finished. Her memory was not enough. Her voice had reached the dead, but now it must reach the living. A child stirred, not from love but from necessity. He would not be born for warmth. He would be born for correction. Because when the throne is empty and the scale tilts, Egypt does not seek revenge. It seeks return. He was not conceived in passion. He was conceived in precision. Horus was not born to comfort. He was born to restore. The union of Isis and Osiris was not of flesh. It was of alignment. Because the gods did not require bodies. They required purpose, and purpose was now urgent. The child was not an heir. He was a consequence of imbalance. Where there is fracture, Egypt responds, not with destruction, but with design. Isis did not cry. She calculated. She knew that blood could not avenge Osiris. Only balance could. So she shaped the child, not in her image, but in the image of law. Every breath of Horus carried the memory of loss. Every heartbeat echoed with judgment. He would not inherit, he would prove. Because rule in Egypt was not passed down, it was weighed, and Horus was born to be weighed. As a child, he did not play. He learned symbols, not games. He watched the stars, not for wonder, but for alignment. His childhood was preparation. His birth, a signal to the people, to the gods, to the land itself, that restoration was no longer hoped for. It was embodied. But even in this there was danger, because power even when righteous can unbalance, and vengeance even when earned can distort. Horus would face not just Set, he would face himself. Would he become ruler or reflection? Would he align with order or recreate conflict? Because law does not favor blood, it favors balance, and balance does not favor anyone. It simply endures. He was born from silence, but raised by necessity. Horus was not trained in palace halls. He was sharpened in exile, not among gold but among stone, not by comfort but by code. The sky itself watched him grow, not as a child of grief but as a weapon of balance, and a weapon must learn restraint before it learns force. Isis taught him to speak few words. Thoth taught him to weigh them, because battle in Egypt was never just blade against blade. It was symbol against distortion. It was meaning against excess. Horus learned the winds, not to fly, but to feel direction. He studied falcons, not to dominate air, but to understand clarity, because the sky is not violent. It is vast, and in its silence power waits, Set ruled, but he did not see. That power watched him from above. Horus did not rush to war. He waited, because justice in Egypt does not come in haste. It comes when imbalance exposes itself. Set grew louder, the land grew quieter. Fields still yielded grain, but the songs were missing. Temples still stood, but the prayers echoed hollow. The people remembered Osiris, not with grief, but with measurement. What had been was still possible, because Horus was still preparing. He learned restraint. He learned silence. He learned how not to strike, because when the blow would come, it had to be clean, not for pain, but for restoration. The sky would not strike in rage. It would strike in clarity, and clarity was forming its wings. Egypt did not collapse, it waited. Law does not panic, it prepares. When Horus rose, it was not to avenge. It was to reveal. The war was not between gods. It was between conditions. Imbalance had taken form in the figure of Set. Order took shape in the purpose of Horus. But this was not simple, because Set was not evil. He was excess. He was force without restraint, strength without alignment. And Horus was not purity. He was resolve. He was the structure built from fracture. The war began not with swords but with signs. Floods misaligned. Winds shifted. Crops hesitated. Dreams grew darker. Even the animals sensed the weight. Because war in myth is not for conquest, it is for correction. Each battle was not a display, it was a measurement. Set struck first as chaos does, loud, direct, certain. Horus responded as balance must, patient, precise, silent. The war unfolded over time, over terrain, over the unseen. Temples cracked, but not because they were attacked, because they were listening. The land measured every move, and every drop of blood carved a symbol into time. The gods watched, not to cheer, but to observe. Even Ra, the sun itself, did not intervene, because light must not interfere with shadow's trial. Set raged as chaos resists exposure. Horus endured as law resists distortion. The war was not won in a moment. It was revealed through balance. In the final clash, Horus did not conquer Set. He exposed him to the sky, to the land, to himself. And in that exposure, judgment was complete. Egypt did not cheer. It exhaled. Because when balance returns, it does not shout. It settles. Victory was not clean, because balance is not without cost. Horus had won, but he had not emerged whole. His eye, the eye of divine perception, had seen too much. It had seen his father dismembered. It had seen his mother grieve it. Had seen power twisted into cruelty and kingship into violation, and vision once stretched cannot return to stillness. The eye of Horus was not just an organ, it was memory made visible. It pulsed with knowledge, but a knowledge too vast for comfort, because to truly see is to never again forget. He could not unsee the torn limbs, the broken law, the trembling order of the world. He could not unsee Set's laughter in the halls of injustice, or the silence of gods when balance cried out. The eye became a wound not of flesh, but of knowing Thoth. The master of balance in word and record saw the crack in Horus's spirit, and so he did not heal the eye. He reassembled it, piece by piece, part by part, symbol by symbol, because healing in Egypt was not return, it was reconstruction. The eye of Horus was not restored to forget, it was restored to carry. Each fraction was a truth, each shape a memory, and in its full circle was pain, insight, strength, loss. The eye became more than vision, it became measure, a symbol, etched into temple walls, into healing spells, into royal crowns, because Egypt knew that to lead one must carry not only power, but memory. The eye was not just a victory, it was a warning. Even justice can leave scars. Even gods must be rebuilt. The war was over, the eye was whole, the enemy was revealed, but the throne remained empty, because kingship is not inherited by blood alone. It is inherited by alignment. Horus had fought, but now he had to prove that he could govern Egypt. Did not rush to place a crown. It watched, because power grasped too quickly becomes repetition of the same wound. The throne had waited, not for a victor, but for a vessel, a shape that could hold both strength and restraint. And Horus, though divine, was not assumed ready. He had to pass, not a trial of force, but of balance. He had to speak with Ma'at, not just honor her, but embody her. He had to sit not in triumph, but in stillness. Because a throne in Egypt was not a seat of command, it was a seat of weight. To sit upon, it was to bear the structure of the cosmos, every law, every ritual, every buried ancestor, every yet unborn soul, all of them gathered beneath the throne. And Horus knew the difference between vengeance and guardianship. He did not raise his voice. He lowered his gaze. He did not demand allegiance. He aligned his breath. This is how Egypt measured readiness: stillness, not noise; presence, not performance. When he sat, the throne did not shine. It settled like sand returning to silence after a storm. The throne was no longer waiting. It had found balance. Victory had been declared. Justice had been restored. Order had been seated. But Osiris did not rise. The throne was no longer his. The world had moved forward. The wound had been sealed, but not reversed. This was Egypt's greatest truth. Even gods do not undo time. Resurrection was not return. Osiris, the once living king, now ruled elsewhere. He had descended not in shame, but in necessity, because death once entered must be honored. To break its seal is to unmake balance. So Osiris remained, not in the sky, not in the temples, but beneath, in the duat, in the unseen kingdom of shadow, of silence, of judgment. This was not exile, it was domain. He became what no god had dared before, the king of the dead, but not dead himself. He was continuity. He was echo. He was presence in absence. And the Egyptians did not mourn him. They became him. In every tomb his name was spoken. In every rite, his silence was obeyed. Because Osiris was not lost, he had transformed. He became the blueprint for all who die and hope to live again. His spine became the pillar of the world. His body, the promise of return, but only for the aligned, only for the just. Osiris was not the god of everyone. He was the god of those who kept balance, even when no one watched. His kingdom was not reward. It was reflection, a mirror to the life one lived, and no prayer could override that. Even in death, the law remained. Osiris did not return to earth because he had become its foundation. The story was told. The gods had chosen. The balance restored. The throne filled. But Egypt did not celebrate. It contemplated because in its deepest wisdom, it knew that stories are not endings. They are containers of silence. And behind every myth, behind every ritual, behind every temple, was a silence older than gods. Not absence, but structure. A silence that speaks only when broken. A silence that holds the world together. The Egyptians did not fill this silence, they listened to it. They carved stone not to speak, but to remember. They built monuments not to show power, but to hold alignment. Every god, every law, every judgment, every burial pointed back to the silence, because the silence was the beginning and the end. Osiris had died and stayed dead, because even gods must obey the stillness. Horus had ruled not to command, but to preserve the quiet order. The duat existed not as punishment, but as space for echoes, and the people who lived under this sky walked carefully, spoke with measure, acted with restraint, because they lived not just in time, but in balance. This is the final truth of the murder of Osiris. It was not a crime, it was a mirror, to show that power without silence leads only to repetition, that justice without stillness is just noise, that kings must die so that law may live, and that Egypt was not built on conquest. It was built on listening to silence, to law, to memory, to the God who never came back, but never truly left Osiris, the silence that holds the world.